The National Weather Service says those in the Northeast are going to see some heavy rain and high winds today, and that could mean flooding in some coastal areas. A powerful storm that swept through California set rainfall records earlier this week. Sacramento set a one-day record for rainfall with nearly 5.5 inches. About 75 miles southwest of Sacramento is Berkeley Hills, where homeowner Paul Henderson rode out the storm.
And all of a sudden, it felt like an earthquake. The house just moved. There was a thud.
He talked to KGO-TV. Now to the shooting at the shopping mall in Boise, Idaho, that left 2 people dead and 4 injured. Police say they still don't know why a gunman opened fire at that shopping mall. Police say they shot it out with the gunman, who's been hospitalized and is in critical condition. There are new COVID rules for those traveling to the U.S. The AP's Julie Walker's got this.
Children under 18 and people from dozens of countries with a shortage of vaccines will be exempt from new rules requiring most travelers to the U.S. be vaccinated against COVID, but will be subject to other rules. Beginning November 8th, foreign non-immigrant adults traveling to the U.S. will need to be fully vaccinated with only limited exceptions. All travelers will need to be...
Reverend's on.
Okay. Hey, Pastor, how you doing?
I'm great, Santita. How are you?
Oh, honey, thank you so much for that store yesterday. I'm trying to remember the name of the store. It was very popular. I know certainly at the beginning of the of 90 when I lived in New York, 90s and all of that. I mean, it was just something fabulous. And I cannot remember the name of it.
Locations in New York too.
Huh?
I said they've got locations in New York, LA. I'm pretty sure this is the store.
Honey, no, it's not the name of it. It was another name.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, honey, because I mean, I used to go regularly, and some high end. Oh, yes, I sure did.
Yeah.
I went all the time
at low end prices.
Oh my gosh! I mean, at a fraction. But you know what the TJ Maxx in Georgetown in DC has Manolo Blahnik boots for like $300-400.
Oh my!
Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you?
I hear you.
I mean, my mother saw me on the floor trying to put this boot on. Okay. Yes.
And they're like Cinderella. You don't make that flip.
Do you understand what I'm saying? No shame. And she looked at me and she said, "You have no shame." I said, "None." I said, "And if this bead of sweat, I don't care. I do not care." She said, "Oh my gosh, I am so embarrassed." I said, "Look at that shoe up there." Ooh. Please, you kidding me? Oh no, sugar. I knew what was up. It was a leather boot, and I knew what the boot cost. And it just had a little nick at the top. Yes, I do have it. Oh yeah, and it fits perfectly. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yes. Loving it. So let me say hello to everybody. I'm sitting up here talking junk, but he just performed a wonderful service for his sister yesterday, telling me about something. I didn't call my mother yet. I'm gonna call her today and let her know. She'll want to go today.
Okay. Yes.
I mean, I'm hearing her heart palpitate right now. Gee whiz. Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, I know what's coming. So let me pull this. Pulled a story. Here it is. We've got the HBCUs and Hispanic serving colleges and, other MSIs, but Hispanic serving colleges in particular have been put on a collision course by the Biden administration. Not only have our monies been shrunken, but we've got to come from the same pot. It's terrible. It really is terrible. Well, hopefully these lessons come hard, sugar.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there we go. I'm not mad at
30
anybody.
seconds.
Thank you so much.
So getting to the
What was
right
over
diagnosis
here?
meant being more open with my doctor about the
Let me
severity of my
pull my
symptoms
time up.
when they were happening.
But there's good news. EPI is manageable, so don't wait any longer. Use the symptom checker at identifyepi.com and schedule
10 seconds.
Okay.
your doctor to ask, could I have EPI?
Sponsored by AbbVie.
10 seconds.
Okay. There you go. Now you're off of that. Thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Santita Jackson Show. It's about almost 6 minutes after the hour on the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Meet my morning stars over on the Santita Jackson YouTube channel. Yes, we've kicked it off, and yes, you all have been growing the numbers, and thank you so much, Renee and Andre and Linda and Dave and Jarvis and Carol. Everybody, please, Daryl, get on over there to the Santita Jackson channel over on YouTube. And, of course, the Santita Jackson and Friends page here on Facebook. We're streaming also on WCPT820.com, AM950radio.com, and on the WCPT Facebook page. We've got a lot to talk about today. HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, that are a product of really, they are reparations of a sort. Coming out of slavery, African Americans got 40 acres and a mule, but they also got some land grant schools, even some as far north as Ohio and Pennsylvania, where African Americans could go to college. We, by and large, were not allowed into the predominantly white institutions. So we created our own, and you created the best, some of the best educated, some of the best, most creative minds America has ever produced. And so that having been said, now, we have minority serving institutions. We have specifically Hispanic serving institutions, and that is wonderful. It's important you get a sense of your culture when you go to these schools that really understand where you come from and include you in their view of the world. Well, now, for the first time, Hispanic serving institutions and HBCUs are on a collision course. We mentioned it last week, but we're going to have the Vice President of the United Negro College Fund to talk about that and the fight that we have on our hands, because really we shouldn't be digging from the same pot. And we're going to be talking about that coming up. Of course, John Nichols is going to be talking about Joe Cinema. Wow, I'm conflating the two. Joe Manchin and what he is doing that is damaging not just Build Back Better, but the climate. Remember, he is a coal mogul. Remember that. So think this thing, it just gets so complicated. We have a lot of questions for Dr. Deborah Verholden and Dr. Shanita Knighton about monoclonal antibodies, treatments for COVID-19 that many doctors, do not know exist, and that many patients are being denied. And so how can that be? We need different layers of protection. We've got to talk about this. And in fact, monoclonal antibodies have been sitting on shelves. I pulled a CNN report early this morning. From January of 2021, that's almost a year ago. They were just sitting there while people needed treatment. We got to talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show. So let us get to some of these headlines before we get good news from Pastor Stephen Thurston of the Salem Baptist Church. Tuesday, October 26th, 2021, the Santita Jackson Show, Chicago. We will have a high of 55 degrees, partly cloudy. Autumn is here, everybody. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 56 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 64 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 136 points. The S&P 500 closed up 21 points. The World Series begins tonight, everybody. Atlanta will be meeting the Astros in Houston. Yay, yay, yay. It's just a great thing. I love this time of year. Oh, and I love that fall classic. And the NBA, well, the Timberwolves fell to the Pelicans. The Pelicans 107, the Timberwolves 98. And the Bulls were triumphant over the Raptors 111 to 108. Okay, it was a squeaker, but at least they won, everybody. And in football, wow. The score doesn't really represent it. It was quite a game, though. The Saints 13 and the Seahawks 10. And tonight in the NHL, the Wild will be playing the Canucks, everybody. And so, the White House, President Biden has refused to assert executive privilege over more documents that former President Trump wants to keep out of the hands of the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. Former President Trump has tried to keep the documents secret by claiming executive privilege. But since he is no longer president, legal experts agree that President Biden has final say on whether they're covered by such a measure. President Biden previously has refused to assert executive privilege over a similar batch of Trump-related documents, and the White House has said Biden wants the committee to have as much information as possible about the January attack. The FDA's Vaccine Advisory Board plans to meet today to discuss whether the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine should be authorized for children between the ages of 5 and 11. Once the FDA makes its authorization, the issue goes to the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Group, which is set to meet November 2nd and 3rd. In Europe, countries are looking uneasily toward another pandemic winter. Europe is the only region in the world reporting an increase in COVID-19 cases right now. What about these Facebook revelations, everybody? A series of news stories dubbed the Facebook Papers, based on thousands of internal company documents, reveals how the platform has been used to sow political discord and extremism around the world, facilitate human trafficking, push hate speech and misinformation, and organize events like the January 6th insurrection. The documents also reveal that Facebook leaders sometimes knew to some extent the damage being caused by its users. The Facebook Papers represents another crisis for the social media giant, which is already under scrutiny from the Senate and some within the company's own ranks. What do you think about that? Is Facebook responsible for what people put out there on their platform? In the meantime, some good news for people who are struggling here in Chicago. The Chicago City Council is poised to vote this week on what would be one of the nation's largest basic income programs, giving 5,000 low-income households $500 per month each, using federal funding from the pandemic stimulus package enacted this year. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has proposed more than $31 million program as part of her 2022 budget, which the City Council is scheduled to consider on Wednesday. The one-year pilot program, funded by the nearly $2 billion that Chicago received from the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan, is supported by most of the city's 50 aldermen. But it has received some pushback from the 20-member Black Caucus, which has urged Mayor Lightfoot to redirect the money to violence prevention programs. Got to get some of them on here to talk about that. What do you think? I think people need the $500, quite frankly. Sheriffs are rejecting Mayor Lightfoot's call for backup as Chicago police quit over the vaccine mandate. Of course, we're seeing lots of firings, and a lot of police officers and firemen and women are leaving the ranks because they refuse to be vaccinated. They refuse to disclose their status. Well, sheriffs don't feel like the onus is on them to go into an emergency situation that was created by poor government and lack of support. Two Illinois sheriffs, Kane County Sheriff Ron Hain, a Democrat, and Kendall County Sheriff Dwight Baird, a Republican, agreed with one another. They said they did not feel like the onus was on them to go into an emergency situation that was created by poor government and a lack of support for officers. The officers received. So they are not going to back up Chicago, as we might be looking at a police officers shortage. ICE data shows that lower immigration arrests are inside of the United States. In the interior of the United States, these arrests fell in the fiscal year 2021 to the lowest level in more than a decade. Roughly half the annual totals recorded during the Trump administration, according to ICE, obtained. This report comes from the Washington Post. And Congress is considering this, Pastor Stephen Thurston. They want to award legendary artist Prince with a Congressional Gold Medal. What do you think about that? Look, excuse me. This is from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She's trying to help out her homie. But you know, let's you got to give credit where credit is due. Is Prince? Prince is one of. He's a legend. He's a legend, and he has helped to reshape popular music, and was at the top of his form when he passed. So hey, Give it to him. Give it to him. Just don't play some of that early stuff. Like Sister, and whatnot that made me go, whoa, what is this? But he was a genius. He really was. He really was. So,
it was amazing.
And changed the industry in terms of business. And that's one of the things that we love. Yeah. My dear friend, Londell McMillan, who was his lawyer, remember when he had slave on the side of his face?
Yes.
Well, what he did, he was the lawyer who got him out of that deal with Warner Brothers, with his name and with his masters. It was a game changer for the industry. And remember, George Michael lost a similar suit. So it just incredible, incredible. So what's the good news today?
Well, we've got some real good news today, and that news is to just be. As you crawled into bed last night, thumped your pillow to make that perfect little cave for your head to rest in, pulled the covers up tight around your chin, and let go of that big sigh that indicates that the day is finished. How did you measure the quality of your day? Yeah, most of us measure our day by what we did. We'll reflect back and count the things on the to-do list that we were able to check off. And the more check marks we have, the better we feel. How well we did will also come into play as we reflect back on our doing. The more praise we receive from things accomplished, either the self-provided kind or that's offered by others, the higher we end up ranking our day in terms of quality. We'll even compare our daily accomplishments against those of our coworkers who trudge through the day, through those hours with us. What happens, however, if you never got done what you wanted to get done, or if what you did was simply more of the same old drudgery that fills most of your days, if you didn't do what you had planned well, or heaven forbid, you messed up royally and had other people to chastise you for it, chances are you thumped your pillow a little harder than necessary. Your ability to fall asleep may have been disturbed as you ruminated regretfully over all the things you did that you wish you hadn't. Listen, I've spent days as a checkmark addict and a competitive comparison seeker. I was compelled to set one goal after another to constantly add to my plate just one more thing on my mile-long to-do list. I believed that I had to do even more in order to feel like I was doing enough. So I did, and I did it, and I did it, Santita, until I couldn't do it anymore. It wore me down and wore me out, and I was forced by doctors, actually, to cut back on the doing and face the reality of my situation. So now I consider myself a pathological doer in recovery. Sadly, most of us still measure the quality of our daily experiences, the quality of our lives, by what we do. We seldom determine the value of our life experience by how we are on the beingness. I know I made that word up, but let's go with it today. The beingness of it all. What would happen, though, if we did? What if you and I ignored the urge to check the check marks on our to-do list before getting into bed? What if we sat quietly somewhere before bed and reflected on how we were that day, how we felt, how others seemed to feel around us, rather than on what we accomplished and who we did more than? Would the quality of our day, would the quality of our life change? Well, I know the quality of my life has changed since I began to measure my day differently. In fact, my life improved almost immediately when I began, at the end of the day, reflecting on the questions that really matter. Questions like, did I smile often today? Did I laugh enough today? Did I find moments of unexpected joy today? Did I take some quiet time just to be in the presence of the moment? Did I love what I was doing throughout the day? Did I love on the people who were around me throughout the day? Did I take the opportunity to reach out a hand of support or offer a few kind words to another person? Not because I had it on my to-do list, but because it was something I was inclined to do from the heart in the moment. Even if you have big, beautiful check marks, beside everything on your to-do list, at the end of the day, there may still be room for improvement in the being department. Most of us spend too much and too many moments of our day diminishing its quality by getting too wrapped up in doing. Recognizing the problem is the first step to healing. Always. You gotta face it in order to fix it. And the good news is that from that awareness, we can grow from the less than good days of being. We can begin to experience life the way we were meant to, with joy and with peace. The quality of our life is determined by who we are, not by what we accomplish. We are, after all, Santita, human beings, not human doings. So let's base the value of our day on that small bit of wisdom I just dropped and live accordingly. Can we just be?
I hear you. I hear you, because I think we are so caught up oftentimes in the money that we make, in the degrees we have, in our so-called accomplishments. In fact, that's how we know a child is successful. Like, look at what they're doing. Then, the child has a breakdown or kills themselves. But they were doing so well. No, they weren't. No. Or you find out. But everybody's, what also, Pastor? Everybody's going through something. Everybody. Everybody. So just stop and just kind of put that in the back of your mind. And just know that we are much more, would you say, we're not human doings, we're human beings. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. No, I needed that. I needed to hear that today. I know that it blessed somebody out there. Blessings. Joyce said, amen. I know that. I know that. I know that. I hear you. I hear you, Carol. And Monique and Evangelist S. Davis down there in Paris, Tennessee. Sending you much love, everybody. Pastor Stephen Thurston, how can we get your book, Mirror Moments?
You can head over to my website, Stephen with the PH, Thurston.com. It's right there with a bunch of other content that I believe that will bless, change, and challenge your life.
I think it will, because we all need a mirror moment. We all need a mirror moment, or mirror moments throughout our day. Everybody. The teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church here in Chicago, the House of Hope. Blessings to you, Pastor Stephen Thurston. Boy, you know what? Got a whole lot of questions for Dr. Deborah Verholden, and we're going to bring Dr. Knighton on in a few. But I got to start with you, Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's medical school. And, of course, she comes out of Johns Hopkins. We're always so pleased and honored to have you because, it's like, when I have a question about my health, I just wait till about 6 o'clock in the morning. I know I can ask you about it. Wait a minute, honey, this is like, I don't even have to wait for my appointment. I can fucking for you. I look at that. Should I be concerned? Am I doing the most? People are still asking questions about these boosters before I go to some of these other questions that I have for you on the other side of the break. I was reading this New York Times article that says that some federal advisors have misgivings. Let me read a portion of this story to you. Following a series of endorsements over the last month by scientific panels advising federal agency, tens of millions of Americans are now eligible for COVID booster shots. But the recommendations, even those approved unanimously, mask significant dissent and disquiet among those advisors. That is, people in your ranks, Dr. Deborah Verholden. In interviews last week, several advisors to the CDC and to the Food and Drug Administration said data show that, with the exception of adults over 65, the vast majority of Americans are already well protected against severe illness and do not need booster shots. All the advisors acknowledged that they were obligated to make difficult choices based on sparse research, which is what you talked about, which is why I pulled this article, in the middle of a public health emergency. But some said they felt compelled to vote for the shots because of the way the federal agencies framed the questions that they were asked to consider. Other committee experts said that they wanted to avoid confusing the public further by dissenting, or that they voted according to their views of the evidence and were simply overruled. we don't see that piece. I think it's important because when we heard you yesterday, one of the Santita Jackson Morning Stars said, "Hey, wait a minute, are you anti-vax?" You said no. It's just a lot more complex than is being presented to you. There's a lot going on here. Can you speak to that? I got about 3 minutes for you.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very good question and so here's what I say. And we learned this, I think, with our former CDC director, Robert Redfield. Mm. When people say things like that, I really honestly say shame on them. Because here's the reality. You raise your hand for the job. And if you feel...
Dr. Deborah Furholden? Okay, well, she dropped, but she'll come back. I want her to speak to that. What do you think? What do you think about that? This lets you know that there's far more debate going on about the vaccines, about the booster shots. There's far more debate, and that's what happens in science. And just please, in the workplace, people see things differently. I have 2 minutes for you, Dr. Deborah Furholden.
Sorry, I got so excited about this, but I really do fundamentally believe this. You raise your hand for the job, you take the paycheck, okay? Mm. So when people say things like, I felt pressure to, or I this, or I that, then don't do the job. I mean, that's my honest opinion. Don't do the job. Robert Redfield said his hands were tied, the president this, and that. Then don't do the job. Don't do the job, or do the job that you raised your hand to do and get what comes with that. Do you realize that man would have been able to have any job on the planet that he wanted if he had actually stood up and said, I am not going to be pressured. I'm not going to be anybody's political pawn. I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell them what they need to hear, and I'm going to tell them my understanding of the science and good public health as best I know it. That's what I'm going to do. He could have got any job he wanted. Right there, the CDC would have been child's play. So when people sign up to serve on these boards, and then they say, well, I didn't want to, ruffle any feathers. I kind of wanted to go along and get along. Shame on you. Then resign. Don't do the job. And I realize we don't teach courage, and we often don't reward it. And if you can't muster it up and generate it from your being, that's easy to do what they did, right? The doing part is, but the being is being courageous, not being able to act even in the face of your fears. Mm-hmm. And if people don't have that, then they shouldn't do anything except for resign the post.
Well, look.
And I believe that.
I wanted to bring that to you because when I saw that, I said, okay, there's a debate. And you've actually engaged in the debate on the show. You said, wait a minute, we got to look at this because this is happening real fast and we need more data. You keep saying that because you are data driven. You said we need more data. We need more information. People are talking about, mixing different vaccines. You're like, no, we need more data. We need more data. And now we're hearing that there's really the politics are in this, right? And so everybody, it's something to think about. We've got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Doctors are often unaware of the only treatment or some of the only treatments for early COVID, and patients are being denied that. And we've had monoclonal antibodies sitting on shelves. That comes from a CNN report, Dr. Deborah Furholden, from January. Got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763. What's on your mind today on the Santita Jackson Show? Let's talk. Back in just a minute. Dr. Deb, I'm glad I pulled that for you. I sent it to you as well, but I know I sent it to you late. But you know me, I'm always looking real late.
I didn't see it. Wait, let me see. Sorry about that.
No. I try not to give you spring a surprise on you.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I've heard some of the rumblings of, because I did this really interesting show with Robert on Sunday. He called me up and says, hey, I need you to come on my show. I got Dr. Umar on. Yes, Dr. Umar. And he said I was actually really pleasantly surprised.
Mhm.
I don't know Dr. Umar that well. One of my daughters is a huge fan.
Yes,
Huge
yes.
fan. She said he asked the questions that we all need to be asking.
Mhm.
If people try to dog him out, he's just very pro-black, and that just makes so many people uncomfortable and blah, 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 blah. So I don't really know him that well, but I said, sure, I'll come on. And I've been on Robert's show, which is very different than yours. People on Robert's show are a trip. and a real trip.
Dr. Nine's on.
And he asked, honestly, some very good questions.
People want to know, Dr. Verholden and Dr. Knighton, just because people ask questions, just because people have not gotten the shots, just because they are deviating from what you hear the corporate media tell you to think, it doesn't mean they're anti-anything. It means you're curious. And as far as I know, with my limited time in the sciences, and certainly in math, because that's what I was recruited to school. I was empowered to study math. It is what it is. 1 + 1 = 2. E = mc squared. I know that's from physics, but it is what it is, everybody. It is what it is. I had a calculus teacher, Dr. Sacheret, God bless him. Joe was crazy. He was fond of giving us not just word problems, but he was very fond of giving us written definitions. And honey, if you missed a comma, you'd get docked big points, depending upon where the comma was placed or not placed. He said you would change the meaning of this theorem. So yeah, I'm docking you.
You can do that with a sentence. You can put a comma in a different place and make a whole sentence different.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And that's why I'm bringing this, because it's like, whoa, hold on. The debate. It's like you said, that's how I felt about the mask last year. That's why I told you my mother made these little mattresses that we wore, but I wore them because you know what, nothing got through, including my breath. But that having been said, girl.
You said I fainted every 5 minutes, but I didn't get COVID.
Girl, look, my brother Jonathan took my mother to Costco, her favorite store. He said, oh yeah, he said, I think I need an oxygen tank at home. I said, what's going on? He said, I put on that mask Mama made and I was about to die. But she was not going to move until I put that mask on my face. He said, I couldn't breathe. I said,
when people don't have that good information that seems reliable, reliability is hearing the same thing over and over, right? Is it reliable? Is it going to, are the same type of people saying the same type of things, right? And then when you have Dr. Fauci who says, I think masks aren't that important. And he forgets he said that. And when he said that, we were all up in arms. Like
30 seconds.
They making a movie about this man called Fauci.
Yes.
Like, well, go ahead and sit down
they need to talk about what happened in Wuhan that came out last week, gain of function research. They just need to stop it. They need to stop.
Yeah.
And see, mind you, I believe in all of the layers of protection. I do.
Seconds.
I should ask questions about it.
Absolutely.
I mean, without you calling me a name.
No, I have grown.
Stand by. We're coming up because I want us to talk about this here. D. Ray says you rock, Dr. Deb.
This is the Santita Jackson Show. To a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Do you have any thoughts about all of the information that we continue to get about vaccines and just other things that are in the news? Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. That's WCPT. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're talking with Dr. Deb. Dr. Deb, Associate of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and she is also, she comes out of Johns Hopkins. Brilliant epidemiologist, and we're bringing to you once again someone she brought to us. She said, Santita, you've got to get her on your show because this is a crucial piece, excuse me, that we're missing in this COVID fight. infection prevention. I had never heard of it, Dr. Deb. I had never heard of it. But this PhD, who's a registered nurse, who's a research scholar, she just got a big award. She's the Distinguished Alumni at Case Western Reserve, where she is also teaching and working. Dr. Shanina Knighton, you all love her too. Dr. Nina.preventionist on Instagram. And we're learning how to wash our hands. And gee whiz, Dr. Deb, we're learning everything. But you were making the point about the debate before we move on to this next topic. You were making the point. I wanted you to finish your point about this debate about boosters. The story that came out in the New York Times that some of these federal advisors have misgivings, and you said, look, if you have misgivings and you don't take the stand on it, then you need to get out the job.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you need to be honest. You need to be honest about your misgivings. If there's a criteria, so I just came out of NIH grant reviews. I review grants for the NIH and have been for 15 years. And there's criteria. This is what the bar is. This is what the ratings and the rankings look like. And you are supposed to apply your judgment to that rubric and then assign scores to everything. Okay? Same thing on these panels. They're supposed to vote and make recommendations. Same way if you're on a jury. The first thing the judge does is explain to you what the bar is. And the bar is one thing in a criminal case. It's another thing in a civil case. In a criminal case, I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I think in a civil case, it's a preponderance of the evidence, right? But they explain to you what the rubric is, and you are supposed to cast your vote based on that. Not cast your vote based on whether or not you're tired, whether or not you feel undue social pressure, whether or not you're worried about getting it wrong and being embarrassed later. None of those things are supposed to factor in to the actual bottom line decision that people make. So when I hear stories of people who are put in these trusted positions who are supposed to be independent, operating outside of those things, not giving into undue political pressure, not giving into social pressure, not worried about what the headline will say, but they raised their hand and said, I will serve and I will do what's right, and I will do what's right based on the rubric that you gave me and my understanding of the science. And then they don't do that, then they need to get out of there. They need to go. I agree. Is not the time for cowardice. And I'm sorry, I'm not judging anybody. But if you know that you aren't able to do that and you agree to do it, you're wrong. If you raise your hand and you accept the post, then do the job and do it as designed. If you aren't able to do that, then don't do the job. It's just that simple for me.
Mic drop on that. And Paula Garcini Zipser says, hey, Paula, she says, people, you have to see Shanina Knighton's Instagram, Dr. Nina .preventionist, because you know what? I don't know why Dr. Deb brought someone onto this show who makes us all curl up in a ball. We all say, "Whoa, I'm doing everything wrong." You told me this, Deborah. You told me. You said, "Girl, when you hear what she's got to say, she is so bad." When you hear what she's got to say, you are going to say, "Oh my gosh." We need to get the word out, because I can't believe that we've not had an infection preventionist helping to lead the conversation and helping to lead the healthcare in a pandemic. When you have a communicable virus that has killed people. Wow. Anyway, you know what? I came across this story, and I want to give this to both of you ladies. I was, I start getting ready in the morning at 2:00 in the morning because I want to hear the news. Things turn overnight and all of that. So I listened to different stations, and I came across this story in earshot when I was getting myself together. I heard on CNN, so I said, "Oh, let me go grab this." There was a cancer patient, Miss Myra Arana. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She'd been vaccinated against COVID, but she developed a breakthrough infection, and she feared that the virus might kill her because her immune system was weakened after her treatment for leukemia. And so their family physician told her there wasn't much she could do besides stay home and rest. We've talked about this, Dr. Deb and Dr. Knighton, that when people get diagnosed with COVID, they're sent home. I'm like, huh? What is that? Well, she said, and I'm Catholic, and I kept praying. At home, she followed her doctor's advice, but she kept feeling sicker. okay, because she had untreated COVID. Her husband placed a pulse oximeter on her fingertip, and it showed her blood oxygen levels were dipping dangerously low, and she kept on praying. And it turns out her family physician was wrong. There is a treatment for early stage COVID, according to this report. By this point, she was so weak she couldn't walk on on her own. Her husband, a school bus driver and custodian, got her out of bed and drove her to the University of California at Fresno, where she received 4 shots of monoclonal antibodies. And now, she said the next day I could feel a difference. 2 days later, I could get out of bed and clean the house and feed my children. I really do think the antibodies saved my life. Now, marrying this to, and now this report came out yesterday. Now, in January of this year, life-saving COVID-19 antibody treatments are plentiful, but are still sitting on the shelf. Now, that was from CNN as well. Dr. Deb, before we go to Dr. Knighton, how is it that physicians don't know about monoclonal antibody treatments? This woman had to go to another physician, to her oncologist, not her family physician, which is where most of us go. She had to go to her oncologist, and he said, "Oh, hey, no, you can have something." They told her she had COVID, knowing that she had leukemia, and they sent her home. What is that?
Yeah, this is the problem around this continuing medical education with some of our providers. You've got some, and you've had many of them on the show, who are really up to speed and up to date on what's happening when it comes to COVID and COVID care and COVID treatment. Then you've got, people like, it sounds like this woman's physician who are, seeing patients in their office. They're not in the hospitals. They're not in the clinics. They're not reading the journals. They're not sort of staying up on not just the science, but also the access. Because it's not just about understanding the benefit of monoclonal antibodies and when they're supposed to be, administered. What most people don't realize is you're supposed to get those very early on. You're not supposed to wait till somebody is really deathly ill to give them to them. I have a friend here who literally got his vaccine, and the next day he tested positive for COVID. Boy, that was an interesting conversation, because you could not tell him that he didn't get COVID from the vaccine. And I told him, physically impossible. Even if they had injected you with COVID itself, you would have tested positive the next day. Okay? So people, they don't know. They haven't stayed up on the science. And so then it's sort of up to people to kind of, be their own best advocate, which is tough.
But when you
medical doctor.
But Dr. Deb, when you try to look for a therapeutic, people look at you sideways, particularly for the unvaccinated, which is so wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wrong. It's like, wait a minute, there are treatments. Why aren't we talking about them too?
Well, and they're available. My friend is a veteran. This was earlier in the effort where people were still having trouble getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
And he went to the Veterans Administration and got his vaccine. And when he went back and tested at the VA and tested positive, they gave him monoclonal antibodies the same day. He only had the sniffles.
But
that was his only symptom.
That's like Governor Abbott in Texas, right?
Yeah.
He had the sniffles, and which is what I'm saying. I think I'm glad for him. It should happen for everybody, Dr. Deb.
Equity. That's all I'm fighting for out in these streets, in these health streets. Is equity
in the health streets? Okay.
In these health streets and healthcare streets, yes.
But it's true. It's true.
I want to add a layer onto that, and I just want people to think about this. So not all, just like the vaccine is still up under emergency use authorization, the monoclonal antibody treatments are also up under emergency use authorization. And so we have to remember that at one point they were only being used for cancer patients. The other piece of it is that if you have been vaccinated you cannot, vice versa. So if you receive a monoclonal antibody infusion for COVID-19, you can't be vaccinated for 90 days, within 90 days of having the infusion.
Let me say that one more
And
time.
it's vice versa.
No, say that again, please.
If you receive monoclonal antibody infusion for COVID-19, you can't be vaccinated within 90 days of the infusion. If you receive the vaccination, it is still unknown of whether or not you can be treated with monoclonal antibody treatment 90 days after vaccination. And so we also have to remember that just the way people have their skepticism regarding the science around the boosters and what we describe as being the vaccine cocktails of being able to mix the vaccines, there is that same skepticism that once you are vaccinated, is it still safe for you to receive the monoclonal antibody infusions within that 90-day period that they originally put out? And so I do say that to people because it is this automatic assumption that these treatments are being withheld. And I'm not saying that they're not, but we also still have to remember that just as we are looking at the skepticism of the vaccine and people are saying, well, I don't know what's in it, I don't know what they're doing, that's honestly the same skepticism that we should be thinking about in regards to the treatments because, yes, while they are showing that they are effective, the vaccines are also showing that they're effective too. And they are a form of treatment, but we're still studying them. We're still studying all of these methods. And so I just want to kind of keep that in mind. Okay. I'm not deterring people, but people can end up going into a hospital and asking for these antibody treatments within a certain period, like let's say of having COVID or having a COVID-19 vaccine and potentially put themselves in a worse state. The other piece of it is yes, they did approve, corticosteroids. They approved remdesivir. So these are things that are FDA approved that were at once utilized for something else and were found to be effective against COVID-19. So with these particular drugs, we have to remember that when we're talking about steroids, for a person that is already immunocompromised, them getting a steroid is going to further compromise their system. And on top of getting a steroid, we have to take into account other things such as diabetes. Because if you have diabetes, we already know that some of these steroids can very well put you over the top of, it can convert you over to type 2 diabetes, with the steroids if you are already borderline. And so if you couple that with COVID, which we already know too, wreaks havoc on our blood sugars, then we already know that we could be ending up in a situation of where it spikes our blood sugar even further. And that brings on a whole nother set of problems. And so it is unfortunate. I wish things were just like, let's say, straight and cut and dry. But unfortunately, this is a balancing game of where it's not a one shoe fits all. It's really not. And that's the unfortunate part because everyone may ask for treatment, but it may not necessarily be in their best interest.
But everybody needs to get up on the science, particularly our physicians, many of who have not been able to get access to a lot of this information, unfortunately. And so we need transparency. I want you to answer Carol Soskin's question before I get to some of these callers very quickly, everybody. She said, I'm getting my booster next week, in the next week or so. And are you saying yes or no, it's okay to get it?
Talk to your physician or talk to your provider. That's what I'm advising. Your provider will know whether or not it is the best option for you. Without me even knowing a medical history, even being licensed to make that decision for her, I can't give her that advice about whether or not to get it.
Well, let me go to Norma from Indiana. Norma, what's on your mind this morning? How you doing, Norma?
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Of course.
Good morning to the folks there in the studio with you.
Where are you in Indiana?
Gary.
All right. I love Gary. Oh, come on. We love Gary. We love Mayor so much. We love it.
Yes, and we definitely liked. I definitely like Reverend Jackson because I took a busload of people from my high school when he first started Operation Push. So Operation
thank you.
That.
Thank you.
But in any event, you're welcome. Long-term strategies concerning the coronavirus. While we have some health professionals on the line, I'm not a health professional, but let me just say this: we have the Build Back Better plan coming, and I'm thinking they were able to predict that African American people and people of color were going to have trouble with this coronavirus as it came in back in early 2020 because they knew we lived in food deserts. So could we use that Build Back Better funds to see if we could get rid of those food deserts as a long-term strategy for building immunity? That's number one. Number two, it's my understanding that this coronavirus is airborne. It's in the air. Like with big storms and stuff, it can blow it from anywhere. Okay, so then now we've got the Delta variant, we've got a Delta Plus variant, we've got a Mu variant, and such. So it seems to me that a mask mandate, a true mandate, would be helpful. And then number three is this: would better house cleaning and preventive measures help us, like removing shoes at the door? A lot of Americans don't do that. Or changing our pillowcases way more often. Or truly cleaning the walls near our toilets. Now, I'll be honest, I do house cleaning as a sideline.
But that's important. That's important.
Important. Some of these things might help us as long-term strategies, and so I'm just throwing it out there to the health professionals.
Norma, stay right there so that they can take this one.
Yes,
what was the first point you made? Very quickly.
Basically, I was just saying that Build Back Better plan. We need funds in there to remove food deserts
Hold on.
that surround the
Stay right there.
African communities.
Stay right there because we're coming. We only have like 7 or 8 more minutes. Dr. Deb, she's talking about equity, and you and Dr. Knight can talk about that. But Dr. Deb, this is policy. Should that be part of Build Back Better?
Yeah, for sure. But I want to be really clear. Solving the issues around food deserts is not going to be a long-term strategy to solve corona. That's going to be a long-term strategy to promote health and vibrancy in communities, right? So that we're now getting out of this isn't a COVID-specific strategy, but people having access to high-quality and affordable healthy foods we know is just what is health promoting. Mm-hmm. So we need that. We needed that before COVID, and it's not just putting the food there. It's also people got to be able to get to it, and it's got to be affordable. Okay. So yeah, we need that. We need a whole lot of things like that. These sort of infrastructure strategies that address what we call the social determinants of health. So 100%, I agree with that.
What about cleaning your bathroom? I'm sorry. She was saying, what about preventive measures in our homes, removing your shoes, really knowing how to clean your bathroom, particularly around the toilet area.
When you listen to Dr. Knighton, she will tell you about people coming in with their shoes and what's on the bottom of their shoes, and then they get in their bed. And, I've seen people at the hospital. I'm now hypersensitive to all this stuff. I've seen people at the hospital that have walked outside in the little hospital slippers. Walked through the hospital, walked outside, smoked a cigarette, come back in with those same slippers on, and then got back in their hospital bed. Makes my skin crawl. Are all of these strategies helpful? Yes, but where I think we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck is not on overemphasizing. And don't get me wrong, the individual, what people can do, what's in their hands, strategies to empower individuals to protect themselves and their families, I think are super duper important. Okay, so I'm not minimizing those or making it an either or. But my work is really around what are the systematic structural changes that need to happen to put a whole blanket of protection over an entire community. That aligns with some of Dr. Knighton's work because she's trying to figure out how do we do that in healthcare and other community settings. I'm trying to figure out how do we do that at a community and a system-wide level. So strategies like increasing access to healthy food, making sure there are places for people to engage in outdoor recreation in their neighborhoods. Neighborhoods don't have sidewalks, don't have places for kids to play outside or ride their bikes and things like that. Or neighborhoods are so violent that it's not safe for kids to be outside even if there were sidewalks. So as a result, kids are stuck in the house, sitting in front of the TV, eating unhealthy food and things like that. The COVID pandemic to me has really shined a light on, it didn't cause, but it just shined a light on all of the systemic and systematic inequities that we have that push people towards poorer health. And those are the factors I really think Build Back Better needs to focus on.
Well, Dr. Knighton, what about taking off your shoes and knowing how to clean the bathroom?
All of those things are important, but I think also, too, the same way we concerned about people coming in our houses, we need to be concerned about what we bring into our houses. And it's many things that we just don't typically think about. So, for example, with a woman and her purse, if you know that you set your purse down on the seat on the subway, okay, and then you set it down on the floor somewhere else, you set it up on the grocery store counter, you put it in the grocery store cart, which we already know that they found E. coli in the tops of those carts because people put their kids up there, and you know what can happen with them diapers sometimes. So you take all of those germs and you bring them into your house, and you don't think about cleaning the bottom of that bag. And if it's an expensive bag, then you already know that it might have certain cleaning measures, and you might not be cleaning it. So it could be very well contaminated on the bottom of the bag. I've seen people sit those bags on their beds. I've seen them put them on their kitchen tables, all kinds of stuff, because they really don't think about what's going on with that bag. So I always think about it from the perspective of what are you even bringing into your own home? Shoes is a starting point. Shoes are always a starting point. If you think about the fact that you were having a conversation with somebody in the era of COVID and y'all are standing face to face, and the fact that they droplets and fell down on your leather shoes and your droplets and fell down on their leather shoes, and the first thing you do is you don't take them off, or when you get home, eventually you take them off, but you don't think about washing your hands after removing your shoes. And so it's like the thing is, it's not just about taking them off, but did you take them off and wash your hands? This is why everything I say always comes back to hand hygiene. So it's very essential that we think about that. And just going back to a comment, and I'm going to bring this up because it touched home, and this is about the thing about the grocery stores and the food deserts. One thing that we really don't think about that I know I didn't think about, so I actually live in a food desert, and they took the only grocery store out of our neighborhood. I called corporate, I complained, I fussed, I did all of that. We signed petitions, but you know what was happening? People were stealing from the grocery store. So they said people stole from us so much that we were no longer profitable and we had to go out of business. And so I think also, too, sometimes we don't realize that we do ourselves a disservice as a people, and that we actually make the resources leave our neighborhoods when they are not remaining profitable and when we do things like steal. And so I know that's not a perspective that people typically think about or tend to appreciate, because it goes to a whole other issue of why are people stealing? Do they have enough resources to be able to purchase? Is it a money management issue? We don't know. But I am simply telling you that, absolutely, I agree with Dr. Deb. It is a complicated issue, and one that I had to gain an appreciation for, of looking at from all sides of why do these problems continue to exist.
And, and that's why you have to vote, everybody, because we are looking at getting our Mayor Lori Lightfoot, is looking at allocating $500 a month from the COVID emergency fund that was granted to the city of Chicago. That could be helpful. But we got to be good stewards when we get these stores into our neighborhood so that they will stay. Mama D, we're going to talk with you very quickly during the break, but everybody, coming up, we're going to talk about HBCUs and Hispanic serving colleges. They're on a collision course, having to get money from the same well, and it's fewer dollars. But should Black and brown people be fighting over education? Back in just a minute, and John Nichols in the next hour. Back in just a minute. Kuzme, can we bring Mama D up very quickly, because I've got to let Doctors Knighton and and for Holden, go.
She's up right now?
Okay.
Am I on yet?
Mama D, yes, ma'am. Just very quickly. I'm sorry we couldn't get to you during on air, but you're on Facebook Live.
Very quickly, I think it's awful that Trump can set aside billions of dollars for descendants of slaves, and then Biden come in and reduce that amount and cut in Brown when what happened to us didn't happen to everybody. And that guaranteed income for all is a sneaky way to avoid reparations that would make the descendants of slaves whole, because what happened to us did not happen to everybody. And Biden should not cut that money that Trump set aside. If he does, he's going to make a whole lot of Democrats, like myself, turn Republican.
All right, Mama D. Mama D has spoken. For a whole, I mean, you know, but things are happening. They're happening all over, and so.
I don't know about turning Republican, but here's what I'm gonna tell you. I learned in this last election. I'm not giving away my vote anymore.
Don't ever do that.
No more. I think we missed the chance. We missed the chance to hold our president's feet over the fire before he was our president. I think and I know a lot of people tried.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They were so desperate to get Trump out that when we got to South Carolina, when you had a candidate who was losing everything, you had someone who said, I know him, he likes us, I know his feelings, and this is what we got. We have him bargaining with two people with whom he is ideologically in sync, Sinema and Manchin. He is a right-wing Democrat. I mean, and I like him. That has nothing to do with where his political inclinations are. And how now we're getting jammed here. The Build Back Better was $16 trillion. It was negotiated down to 6, then 3.5. Now it's going to be under 2. What? And then two years of free college is off. Girl, get out of here. Out of here. Colleges. We're already struggling. You know, Howard is my school. They're having a protest now because they're having so much trouble in the dormitories. Let me tell you, these black colleges are great. They're great. They're also seriously underfunded. That's what happens when you get to these black schools. I went to my brother at UVA, and I would go see my friends over at Georgetown, just across the street, or one of my best friends who was up at Princeton, and some friends who were up at Harvard. And I would see their dorms. I was like, whoa. Then my friend had maid service at the University of Pennsylvania. I was like, what? Oh, Mama, Daddy, what? This that you see between black colleges and PWIs, predominantly white institutions. I mean, billion-dollar endowments in the Ivy League, and black colleges are struggling to get their operating budgets from year to year. I mean, Dr. King came out of a black college before he got to Boston. Okay, they take the diamonds and they polish them. Reggie Lewis went to Virginia Union. Harvard didn't want him yet. Don't get me started on this.
I know, but I'm going to tell you this. Look, it's crazy because I be reading those Claude Anderson books, and when I tell you, I ain't going to lie, I feel like he predicted a lot of this stuff
Of course.
A while ago, like, to be honest.
Of course.
So it's where it's not even surprising. It's just like, oh, man, like he said this was coming.
And here we are.
So it's just, yeah.
Here we are. Well, lovely ladies, boy, did we have some fun this morning.
Watch your purses.
Girl, look.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. You know, and I got this cute purse, and I don't want to even carry it outside now. I'm gonna keep it in my lap like I did on the plane. Yes, I did. I was so enamored of my cute little purse. It's all painted up. It looks crazy. It says, "This is not a Birkin." It looks crazy. It looks crazy. And people were like, what? But you know what? Let me get Mr. Murray up from the United Negro College Fund. I love you, ladies. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, this is your show. So, but Dr. Deb, I need to call you a little bit later today.
That's the only charity I get to is United Negro College.
Oh, well, then say hello to their vice president, Mr. Murray.
I started doing that about 12 years ago.
Mr. Murray, now is it Rodriguez? Or is it Rodriguez?
Yes, Rodriguez, like Rodriguez, but with an L.
Okay. Okay, I was going to say Rodriguez, but it's Rodriguez. Okay. And this is, I want you to say how she wanted, this is Dr. Deborah Verholden. She came out of Johns Hopkins, got her PhD at 24, and she's an epidemiologist. And they brought her to the Michigan State University School of Medicine. She's their Associate Dean of Public Health. She's building their School of Public Health, but she has been a contributor to the UNCF. And then I've got Dr. Shanina Knight, and they're about to leave, but she's, she already left, registered nurse, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, and an infection preventionist. But Dr. Verholden, why don't you say hello to Mr. Murray before we go?
Good morning, Dean. How are you?
I'm good. I was just telling Santita, I started giving to United Negro College Fund about 12 or 13 years ago, and it is the only charitable organization that I give to reliably, consistently every single year.
20 seconds.
And I didn't go to a HBCU, but it's not for, outside management.
10 seconds.
Right there, Dr. Because I want you to say that on the air. I want you to say that on the air. It's very important because we need to save our HBCUs. I don't care where you went to school or whether you didn't or not. Stay right there.
Change the world. Can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Amen. Let's change the world. We can do it. I'm Santita Jackson. It's about 6 minutes after the hour here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thank you for growing it, A. King from Push Memphis, and Dave Dowling, and Jewel, get on over there if you can, and Will Jones and Paula. Everybody. Paula, it's not a Birkin that I have. It's not a Birkin. It's fake. Okay, and it's paint all over it, so it looks crazy. I'm sending you much love today, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts today as we talk about HBCUs, historically black colleges. They're on a collision course with Hispanic serving universities and colleges. Why is that? And why did the pot for our monies get smaller? And what is the special mission of HBCUs? Why should they, I think, be set aside? Yes, I do believe that. So let's get to a few of these headlines, everybody, so that we can get to this particular topic. And of course, John Nichols is talking about Joe Manchin and Build Back Better at the bottom of the hour. Chicago will have a high of 55 degrees. It is partly cloudy. No, it's very cloudy and gray right now. It's Minneapolis, St. Paul, 56 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 64 points. The NASDAQ closed up 136 points yesterday, and the S&P 500 closed up 21 points. The World Series begins tonight, everybody. Atlanta is traveling to Houston. They will be facing off against the Astros. Will they win? The Astros have been into the World Series 3 of the last 5 years, and the Atlanta team has not been there since 1999. Yes, Prince, I hear you. So who you pulling for, everybody? Let me know. In the NBA, the Pelicans were triumphant over the Timberwolves, 107-98. The Bulls pulled it out against the Raptors, 111-108. And then in the NFL, well, it was a squeaker last night. The Saints 13 and the Seahawks 10. And in the National Hockey League, the Wild will be facing off against the Canucks tonight. In the White House, what is going on? President Biden has refused to exert executive privilege over more documents that former President Donald Trump wants to keep out of the hands of the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. President Trump has tried to keep the documents secret by claiming executive privilege, but since he is no longer president, legal experts agree that the current president, Joseph Biden, has final say on whether they're covered by such a measure. Oh, the soap opera continues. The FDA's Vaccine Advisory Board plans to meet today to discuss whether the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine should be authorized for children between the ages of 5 and 11. Once the FDA makes its authorization, the issue goes to the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Group, which is set to meet November 2nd and 3rd. Facebook revelations. What is in this cache of internal documents? A series of news stories dubbed the Facebook Papers, based on thousands of internal documents, reveals how the platform has been used to sow political discord and extremism around the world, facilitate human trafficking, push hate speech and misinformation, and organize events like the January 6th insurrection. What do you think about that, everybody? The teenage mental health, they're saying that they have known that bad things were happening on the platform and they did nothing about it. Do you think that that was their role? Chicago is poised to become one of the nation's largest guaranteed basic income programs. That's right. The city council is poised to vote this week on what would be one of the nation's largest basic income programs, giving 5,000 low-income Chicago households $500 per month using federal funding from the pandemic stimulus package. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has proposed more than $31 million as part of her 2022 budget, which the City Council is scheduled to consider on Wednesday. The one-year pilot program, funded by the nearly $2 billion Chicago received from the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan, is supported by most of the city's 50 aldermen, but it has received pushback from the 20-member Chicago Aldermanic Black Caucus, which has urged Mayor Lightfoot to redirect the money to violence prevention programs, everybody. And sheriffs are rejecting Mayor Lightfoot's call for backup. As Chicago police, we could lose about a third of our force because of the vaccine mandate. But Kane County Sheriff Ron Hain and Kendall County Sheriff Dwight Baird, a Democrat and a Republican, are saying that they will not direct their sheriffs to help Chicago. All right, everybody, what about college? You know I'm a Howardite. I love it. I'm about to talk to a Morehouse man. But before we get to the vice president for governmental affairs for the United Negro College Fund, one of my favorite organizations in the world, Dr. Deborah Verholden, who didn't go to an HBCU, but she said, you know what? This is the charity that I give to reliably. I've been doing it for 20 years. Before we bring on, or as we bring on Mr. Murray, I wanted you to share with the audience why you feel about the United Negro College Fund as you do, Dr. Deborah Verholden.
Yeah, so thank you for that opportunity. It really warmed my heart when you said that you had the UNCF leader coming on, because it's the only, I've given to charities very rarely, though. I'm very particular about who I give my money to. And it's funny because I've actually not given money to my own alma mater, Johns Hopkins. I've given time and talent and treasure, but I've not given my money. The reason that I donate to UNCF is I remember what it was like when I was applying to college. I was not the first generation. I was technically the second person in my family to go to college. My cousin went to HBCU. She made it not even one full semester. So I was technically the second person in my family to go to college. And it was difficult. It was a difficult path to navigate. You know, back then everything wasn't digital. The internet wasn't something that was for public consumption. And it was difficult. And I did not find out about the United Negro College Fund until after I graduated from college. And the thought, and when I learned about their history and what they do, that there's an organization, and who could not love a mind is a terrible thing to waste. I've always been brilliant. I've had people tell me that my whole life. But if I had not had the opportunity to go to college and get that brilliance cultivated and honed, my life would have looked very different. And I would like to think of somebody who does something that makes a difference in the world. And how much of that talent and opportunity are in our communities, but people need that extra hand. They need that extra help, not because there's anything insufficient with them, but we have just historically been left out of these opportunities. We have historically been denied access to high quality, high caliber education, the opportunity to matriculate in the academy. And so I just love the work of UNCF. I give to them reliably, consistently, and you know what happens once you give, they just keep coming back to every year. But it's an easy thing for me to do because I believe in it, and I believe in the brilliance of Black scholars. And I just salute them for the tremendous work that they do to ensure that those scholars have a real opportunity.
Well, I could not give a better introduction to Vice President Rodriguez Murray. He is the vice president for governmental affairs for the United Negro College Fund. Thank you. I just had to have her say that because it's important. Look, I went to Howard. You went to Morehouse. We get it. But I'm so glad that she said
that. And Dean, thanks so much for that. Thank you for your contributions. And I can assure you our development folks will be right in touch with you soon.
Better. You better talk to her. And we need to get her to one of our HBCUs for one of these semesters because we could use her brilliance and her know-how. And I thank you for being with us today, Mr. Murray. I was really struck, and I had this young lady who went to community college herself. She has a compelling story, Bianca Quilantan. She wrote an article in Politico, The Biden Plan that will pit Hispanic-serving colleges against HBCUs, and it broke my heart. But then I was reading the Hilltop, my old paper, and they said, wait a minute. Now, Howard, we can go a little over the top, but I think it really was. It said HBCUs and supporters are in a rage after Biden reduces funding for HBCUs in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. Now, first of all, what's happening with HBCUs and Hispanic-serving colleges and what minority-serving institutions? What's going on?
First of all, thanks so much for allowing me to be on the show, and good morning to everyone listening.
Blessings to you.
Representing the United Negro College Fund, UNCF, I want to bring this perspective to you and provide some clarity. So back in March or April, because, most people started paying attention to this infrastructure and reconciliation drama in the last month or so. President Biden really set this up way back at the beginning of the year in March and April. He put forward these two plans. One was about jobs and infrastructure, and the other one was about families. And these two plans put together, President Biden proposed some $95 billion for both HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions, those that serve tribal, Native Americans, those that serve Hispanic-serving institutions, Asian Pacific Islanders, all of them put together some $95 billion of investments. Now, this is a real key point because no president ever in his landmark accomplishment or his plan has ever put HBCUs and these kinds of institutions so central to his plans. Now, usually we may get in sometimes because members of Congress will fight hard to insert us before the bill becomes law. But this is a president at the very beginning of the process in a central way, in a strong way, putting funding for our schools right there at the forefront. And then Congress has to write the bill. And when Congress started writing the bill a couple months ago, when the proposal came out, the money was tremendously reduced. And so I'll get a little inside politics for you guys and let you know that when the pie of funding or when the whole level of funding is strong enough, everyone's usually fine because that means everyone can get a slice of the pie. But when the pie begins to shrink, then folks begin to fight for the very low real estate or very low funding that's there. And so that's what you began to see here. I think that what we've done through, shows like yours, having this kind of discussion today, and others, is alert people that this is an issue. UNCF has a letter writing campaign where we have a website where people have already sent thousands of letters. And then you have students protesting about infrastructure needs right there at your alma mater down in Atlanta and in the other places. And because of all of that awareness, I think some of these problems are starting to get worked out, but we still have a way to go because this bill has not been finalized yet. It hasn't been voted on yet, and we have to make sure that our schools and our students at HBCUs aren't left behind. These schools began and they've been underfunded since inception. Mm-hmm. And we just think that time is over. We've talked about doing so much with so little for so long, and after the summer of racial recognition we all experienced last year, it's just time to see what these institutions and the students that we serve can do if the funding is adequate. And this type of bill that they're talking about, Another one like it won't come while we're living. So we have to make sure our schools and our students get what they deserve right now.
How is it that we've been put on this collision course with Hispanic serving colleges and minority serving institutions? What happened?
So usually, to be frank, policymakers, if policymakers don't know the minority community well, a lot of times what they'll try to do is clump HBCUs together with other types of institutions that serve minority populations. And in doing that, they try to clump the funding together. But HBCUs are unique institutions. They began at a time when African Americans, it was illegal for us to be educated. And they have endured, some very hard trials and tribulations in our country and have come through in the end and produced some of the greatest leaders that our country's ever known. A Nobel Peace Prize laureate, a Vice President of the United States, 40% of all the Congressional Black Caucus. And the list goes on in terms of the strong percentage, majority of judges, the vast majority of doctors, the vast, vast majority of Black veterinarians, all come from historically Black colleges and universities. And so the product is so strong that we think that the funding shouldn't be anything to fight for. But that's why we're here. That's why our organization exists, to fight for the funding for historically Black colleges and universities. And this is a fight we don't back down from, and we try to make sure that policy and decision makers understand that on a daily basis.
Well, we're talking with Rodriguez Murray. He's the Vice President of Governmental Affairs at the United Negro College Fund. And we're looking at the funding for historically Black colleges and universities. Why are they on a collision course with Hispanic serving colleges? I just think that that's most unfair. And in particular, given the history of HBCUs, can you give us like a quick history of HBCUs? I mean, yes, it was illegal for us to go to PWIs, but I think, we have to look at, this comes from the era of 40 acres and a mule, post-slavery, right? And in some cases, while we were trying to finish up slavery, it was really almost like a form of reparations, but it was done, they were done privately in some respects, but they were land grant schools. Explain what an HBCU is and what makes HBCUs unique.
Sure. So historically Black college or university, or HBCU, is a college that in its charter states that its mission was to educate African Americans. And you had to be established for a certain deadline in the mid-1960s, which is when the term HBCU, or historically Black college university, was codified into law, and the funding, the first federal funding for HBCUs, was put into law. So these are institutions educating the progeny of slaves that have come through a history of discrimination and being underfunded. And when I say being underfunded, the federal government level of funding hasn't met what we've called for most years. When I say underfunded, the public HBCUs in about 20 different states can tell you that many state governments have not met their funding requests or their requirements. When I say underfunded, I mean many philanthropic givers have not given to HBCUs at the same rate that they've given to other institutions. But what we began to see, largely because of the unfortunate death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others last summer, is a shift in thinking about the institutions and the way that people give to them. And that's only a drop in the bucket. The success of the last 365 days of funding for HBCUs does not erase 150 years of large neglect by many in our communities and in our nation. Those that have gone to HBCUs, they can tell you about this wonderful experience of wraparound services that help students feel and perform better They come from underserved backgrounds. 75% of our students come from low to moderate income backgrounds, but the education that they get in HBCU is absolutely life-changing, as the host of this show can tell you. And it allows the whole world of opportunity to be open to you. So that's what happens at HBCU. It's life-changing. It's generation-changing for that person's family. It's the type of education that's really better than the money that you pay for it. But it's kind of the best kept secret in America. And so oftentimes we're having to combat the question in 2021, why do we still need HBCUs? Mm-hmm. The product is still speaking for itself, even if you look right there at the White House. Mm-hmm. And so because the product speaks for itself, we no longer feel the need to have to justify ourselves. We just believe that everyone else should believe in the institutions as much as we do. And so that's what we do on a daily basis at UNCF. We convince philanthropic givers to believe in the institutions. Then my job, and you had it right, Senior Vice President, my job is to convince Congress people and people in the administration to believe in the institutions and make the investments that others had not made in the past. And what we're trying to do is make it possible so that children that grew up like me, children that come from a very low income background, children that had, parents that did not even graduate from high school. So I was a first generation high school graduate. I'm a first generation college graduate. And because of a scholarship from the United Negro College from UNCF, I was able to be debt free from college before age 30 and then have this full circle moment in my life and career where I'm able to be a leader at an organization that helped make my education possible. And so we're looking for even more stories like mine, and I dare say even better, from the young people there in your area and all across this country who are just looking for a little bit of a push in their life to make sure that their full potential can be reached.
Amen. And I think that because of the historical debt that is owed to African Americans, that HBCUs really deserve to be in a special basket. But we owe a lot of people. We owe a lot. I think we need equal access to equal high quality education. That was another HBCU graduate, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., when he was in Congress, had an education amendment to the U.S. Constitution, equal access to equal high quality education for everybody. And, my father and mother met and married at North Carolina A&T State University. I can just tell you, my grandmama got her degree from Hampton when she was 61. God bless her. God rest her soul. These are rich schools, and they deserve the funding. And you know what? I thank God for HBCUs. A Morehouse man sitting on the phone with me this morning. I love it. Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs, United Negro College Fund, Rodriguez Murray. I hope you will come back on this show.
I'm happy to come back, but before I leave, for all your viewers that want to help us convince policy and decision makers that this funding that we've been talking about, that can be in this reconciliation package, this package that they keep talking about $3.5 trillion, $2 trillion, $1.9 trillion, to make sure that HBCUs are well supported and funded, go to www.uncf.org/HBCU Ignite. Again, uncf.org/HBCU Ignite. And you click the button at the top that says email your members. When you click that button, there's a form that you fill out in less than 30 seconds, and you press submit. 3 letters go to Congress, one to your congressman and one to each one of your senators. Not only are we asking your viewers to do it, we want them to tell everybody they know. If you believe in or you ever knew anyone that went to an HBCU, send them to that website. Have them fill out that form, uncf.org/HBCU Ignite. Hit the top button, fill out the form, send it in, share it widely, because we have to make sure that our institutions are well funded, and your members of Congress need to be in the room helping fight for the same thing that I've been talking about this morning.
Send it to me, and I will put it up on my Facebook page. We will disseminate it widely, and we want to have you come back so we can continue to push this.
I want to do it.
All right, I'm gonna send you that text. Blessings to Rodriguez Murray, Senior Vice President, Governmental Affairs, United Negro College Fund. Everybody, mine's a terrible thing to waste. John Nichols coming up on the Santita Jackson Show. Mr. Murray,
thank you guys.
Blessings. Yes. Can't wait to have you back.
I look forward to it.
I'm looking forward to having you back, Morehouse man. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Call me anytime.
Oh, I promise you I will, because, I think, I'd love for you to come back, really just regularly, because I think it's something that you have to push. You just can't do it one time. You have to hit it. You have to hit it. And so just know that this show will be, is available to you as a platform for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
I do mean that. Because
and you guys send the link from today's interview so that we can amplify on social also.
I do that. I'll send you the link to the podcast, which will take all of the commercials out the show. Okay.
Great.
And in fact,
Mr.
some people are doing it right now. Thank you, Mr. Murray. But you'll be hearing from me.
Yes, ma'am.
Blessings to you. Sounded like a Morehouse man, all those manners. I love it. Thank you. The spirit of Dr. Mays permeates.
Oh, don't you get started now.
Don't get me started. I mean, even though my parents went to A&T, I ain't mad because, Ron McNair was there. Boom.
And I worked with Junior a lot early in my career.
Did you really?
So we got a lot to talk about. A lot.
Oh, I love my brother.
If you ask him about Rodriguez, he'll tell you.
You know what? I'm going to connect the two of you.
I look forward to it.
Because that's his thing. I mean, because my parents, he was coming out of St. Albans. He was routed to Brown. And his football coach at St. Albans was furious that my parents made him go to A&T. Furious. And and then I was Harvard and Yale. And some of my counselors at my high school were infuriated that I went to Howard. My mother said, "You're going where you can afford. They've given you a full scholarship." I had one to Spelman too. And she said, but my father said, look, leadership is bred in majority environments. And given where you are, I think you need to go to Howard. That's it. Spelman.
And I believe it worked out well for both of you.
Yeah, well, it all, worked out for all of us. Only one of us didn't go to an HBCU, my brother Yusuf, and he's done quite well. But when he was at St. Albans, he used to stay in the dorm with me all my friends would take care of him. And then we'd go and watch his football games. So he feels kind of like a Howardite. So there you go. Oh, blessings to you. I can't wait to have you back. But I'm going to reach back out to you because I'd like to do this regularly to highlight what you're doing at UNCF, and because we got to get money, we got to keep it going, and we've got to raise awareness for our HBCUs.
You'll find a friend in me.
And when you got one in me, and I will connect you and my brother.
Yes, ma'am. I look forward to it.
Blessings to you. Thank you so much, Mr. Murray.
Take care.
God bless you. John Nichols. Thank you, sweetie.
Hello, my dear.
How are you? Hey, just trying to raise the banner on HBCUs today.
It's the day is the day. There's a lot going on with the funding issues.
Okay, so that's I had to go on and do that because that's I'm a Howardite.
Well, you must.
Can't
Absolutely.
stop. Can't stop. Don't stop. Won't stop. Ooh, ooh.
30 seconds.
Well, no, it's like so many things with the reconciliation and everything else that they keep cutting back, cutting the numbers, cutting the money.
Well, what is it? Who is it? The Pentagon gets $10 billion. They don't ask for. What's that? Come on.
Oh yeah, no, they once again they got more from the Congress than they asked for or than President Biden asked for.
Just stand right there. Stay right there.
Change the world, change the world. Can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, you know it is the bottom of the hour on Tuesday. So, what does that mean? It is John Nichols' time from The Nation magazine, their national correspondent. Of course, he's the author of The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. It's always a joy to be with John Nichols. And boy, we've got to jump right into it because we are in the midst of the fight for funds for Build Back Better. Now, it started at $16 trillion, then it was whittled down to $6, then it was $3.5. And now people saying it's going to be a little north of $2 trillion. This is, it's deceptive, everybody, because it's not $2 trillion or $16 trillion or 6 or 3.5 in one fell swoop. This goes over 10 years, And we've got hard infrastructure, but we've got human infrastructure. This is human infrastructure. This is 2 years of free, or should I say debt-free and free community college for you. If you need to be retrained for your job, this is for you. That's off the table. This is 12 weeks of paid family leave when you have a baby. For you, this is taking something off of your table. This is taking food out of your mouth, taking food out of your baby's mouths. Yeah, you need to be really, really concerned. That's why we're talking about this all the time. And we continue to press the point. Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minneapolis, St. Paul, said, hey, Manchin and Sinema are needing to gut this bill. They're not negotiating, they're trying to gut it. So let's talk about this because there's a lot at stake here, and we had Jim Narakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. He's the editor of Extra, their magazine, in which he said, in which their study demonstrates that the corporate media, MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, et cetera, et al., they have not shown the financial conflicts that Senators Sinema and Manchin have with this bill. They're voting against because Senator Manchin is actually a coal magnate. He's a mogul, yeah. And some of the biggest funders of Senator Sinema are big billionaires who have interests that run counter to Build Back Better. Did I get that right, John Nichols? Because I'm going to let you take it over from here.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's good to be with you again. Look, you're right about two things here. Number one, Joe Manchin has a huge conflict of interest. He is making more money out of the coal industry than he is as a U.S. Senator. Every year, more money is going into his bank account from the coal industry, which his son is heavily involved in a company that Joe Manchin helped to develop. And so the conflict is writ large right there. In addition, you've got the additional conflict, and we rarely refer to it as such, but the fact of the matter is that when you take huge amounts of campaign contributions from a particular industry, that also is a conflict, and he's got that. So by any measure, Joe Manchin is not negotiating in a sincere or honest way. He is not concerned about West Virginia. He is not concerned about, obviously, the rest of the country. He's concerned about himself and his family. That's not a shocking thing. He's not the first politician we can say that about by any measure. But that ought to be a part of the discourse. And so that gets to the second component of what you said. Our media has covered this entire fight over Build Back Better, over the human infrastructure element of this project in an incredibly irresponsible and dysfunctional way. First and foremost, we've got the reality that most people still don't know what all's in this bill. They, even now, if it's being cut down, they don't know what they're losing because so much of the coverage has been about personality. Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema versus Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, House progressives versus House centrists or corporate folks and stuff like that, and about price tags. Oh, it's 6 or 3.5 or 2 or 1.5 or 1 or all these different numbers going around. But the core concept of what's in this bill, that's what's getting lost. And that's bad from a moral standpoint because what's getting lost are things that people need. Funding for education, funding for paid family and medical leave, funding for dental, vision, and hearing for people who rely on Medicare, funding it through Medicaid to pay for caregivers so that families don't go into a crisis if they've got an elderly loved one or a family member with disabilities who needs care. All these things are in there, and as well as the child tax credit, which is vital on fighting poverty. And many of them are getting cut, or at least either reduced or undermined. And the thing that we really should have to talk about is that they're also, at Joe Manchin's demand, cutting one of the biggest projects as regards climate. And that is a set of rules, a set of incentives and mandates that would make our utilities move from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And that, if we don't do that, we can't begin to meet the requirements as regards reducing fossil fuels or meeting the challenge of climate change.
Well, why is that
happen
important?
on the timelines that they say is necessary?
Well, tell me, why is that important for us? Because many of us are trying to get on the bus. We're just trying to make it from day to day. How does climate change impact us as we are in almost flood stage? Because it's been raining constantly for the past few days.
You're answering the question, yeah. And I know it's a rhetorical question because and I think many of your listeners do, but it's important to point it out. And it's, again, something our media should be doing.
But we're not discussing it. You know what I mean? We've not made that conversation relevant here. And I mean, and you have, because I've posted on my Facebook, everybody, and I've tweeted out Joe Manchin's surefire strategy to ensure that the Democrats lose in 2022, because it's a growing conversation, John Nichols, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a growing conversation among people our age. Okay. It's a finished conversation among people under 30, right? The fact of the matter is, if you look at the polling data, young voters see the climate crisis as the top issue, or at the most the second top issue, but it's right at the top of what concerns them, and it's also what motivates them to vote. And so, if Democrats don't deliver on climate change, they're going to have a dramatically harder time getting younger voters to the polls in 2022 and perhaps 2024. Why is that a problem? Because if you look at the data from 2018, a midterm election when Democrats had a great advance and really were able to begin to stall out a lot of the Trump agenda, and 2020, when Trump was beaten, what changed in 2018 and 2020? Maximized turnout. Not as high as it should be even now, but dramatically higher turnout by younger voters. Voters under 30, and even if you go down, voters in the 18 to 24 range, they came out and voted. Multiracial, multi-ethnic. This was a real shift. And if you look at the numbers, right, in these states where Joe Biden won in Wisconsin by 20,000 votes, in Arizona by less than that, in Georgia by roughly equivalent number, these states that literally gave the presidency to Joe Biden, young voters certainly accounted for enough of a boost to make the margin of difference. Now you're taking away, theoretically, if these negotiations are going the way we think, you're taking away the commitment to community college. You're taking away funding for historic black colleges and universities. You're taking away funding for the major climate projects and also mandates as regards to major climate stuff. What signal is that sending to young voters? What is that telling them? Well, we loved your votes in 2018. We loved them in 2020, but we're not going to deliver for you. We're not going to come through for you in the way that, frankly, when Republicans are in power, they come through for their core constituencies. That is a recipe for disaster. It is going to make it dramatically harder to mobilize and turn out young people. There will still be young people who vote from all backgrounds and all parts of the country, but there's a real chance, a genuine chance, that it won't be in sufficient numbers. And so right now, as we watch this fight over the reconciliation bill, Build Back Better bill, as we watch this fight, we are literally seeing Joe Manchin chip away and undermine Democratic chances in 2022.
You know, we're talking with John Nichols, the national correspondent for The Nation magazine and the author of the book. I encourage you to get it. It is fantastic. The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. You need to read it. See, before I go to the callers, that is why I'm bringing up his financial conflicts of interest. I think is very important because, number one, 9 out of 10 of us don't know about it. The media, the corporate media, will not ask any questions about it. It's rude. How can you? I'm like, wait a minute, whoa. I mean, they go, because I see who they go after, John Nichols. They don't go after the corporatists. They go after the populists. They were trying to run Bernie Sanders' wife into the sea. But they don't discuss Kirsten Sinema. The billionaires have her on speed dial. They don't discuss all the money that Joe Manchin makes from coal. I'm not against anyone making money. Don't get me. I'm not coming out of that bag. But be honest about why you're voting the way you are.
Anyway.
I'm sorry.
It's reality, but you can't stop them anyway. It's reality. But you're so very right about this. This gets to the heart of the matter. And look, we need to be blunter in our discussions of these issues. And we talk about the media. I'll give Joy Reid credit. She had me on last week, and we talked about Joe Manchin in very blunt terms, and I appreciate that. And there's some other venues where we've been able to talk about it. But, one-offs, one conversation about something isn't sufficient. It's got to become a part of the narrative. We've got to understand it in a real fundamental sense. Because if we're not blunt about this, if we don't get to the heart of the matter, how are you ever going to shift Joe Manchin's position? Now, he's a politician. He gets scared if he thinks something's going to harm him politically. That's the nature of the game. And so you're not going to harm him by cutting off the fossil fuel money. They love him. They're going to give him that money. But you can impact him by talking about these realities, by making it a clear enough part of the discussion that he's got to respond to it, that he's got to recognize it. And if we fail to do that, he's going to keep right on doing what he's doing. And I'll remind you, Santita, that, they met on Sunday morning and everybody was all like, oh, well, we're going to have a deal. Well, it's now Tuesday morning. We still don't have a deal. We still don't have a deal with Kirsten Sinema either. The fact of the matter is that Sinema and Manchin are continuing to play this thing out day after day, week after week, month after month.
And the media are helping them, John. The corporate media are helping them, and we're not calling them out. See, that to me is what is that is equally shameful. That we're not calling out all these people who get on television and they just run their mouths and they opine at night and they just like they are men and women of the people. They need to shut up because they are not pulling this up. Because I know what they do to populists, right? They run you into the sea. They run you into the sea. But the corporatists, they give them a pass. Stay right here. I want to bring up Chaparral. Chaparral wants to speak with you, she says. She doesn't want to talk to me. She wants to talk to you.
Oh, she loves talking.
That's all right. I love her, but she wants to talk to you. Chaparral, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Santita. Thanks so much for taking my call. Yes, I do want to talk to John because I hear everything that you're saying. And for me, it's so hard, not really hard, but, fictitiously, it's hard to comprehend what in the hell are the Democrats thinking. Because do they actually believe that if they throw everything out the window that we want as Democrats and that we are fighting for and what we put them in office to do they actually think that we're going to hold our nose yet again and vote Democratic? We're going to see people sit out 2022. And the Republicans, unfortunately, will run the table. And we have already seen what Republicans in power can do. And they're willing to risk that for what? To please the corporations around in America? To give them money? To continue to make them rich instead of satisfying the base? And this all stands on the leadership of Biden. Because this is his plan. This is his agenda. It is up to him to actually push this bill through. But because he feels that we as black people and as brown people have no other place to go, as he has said on the Breakfast Club. Well, what are you going to do? You know, so he feels that we are obligated to vote Democratic. Please go back and tell the president, hell no, I don't have to vote for him. Please go tell him, John, so he understands through his thick skull that we do not have to be monolithic and vote for you. I can sit at home and get nothing, because voting for you is getting nothing. That's all I got to say.
Well,
no, stay right there,
I wish I
Chappelle.
could package up what you just said and take it out to the president. I don't. President doesn't always invite me over on Sunday morning like he does Joe Manchin. I wish he did. And I'd go for sure and love to chat with him. I actually think that the president's a pretty good guy. Not perfect, but a pretty good guy. What I can't figure out is why, as Chappelle, points to very well, why Bernie Sanders, who wanted a much bigger program, is fighting harder for the president's program than the president is. I mean, what's up with that? Why is Pramila Jayapal, who wanted a much bigger program, fighting harder for the program than the president is? The president does need to get out there, and he should be. He himself has yet to do what I think he should have done, which is to take a week and do nothing but talk about what's in this program. Every day, event after event, so that there's absolute clarity about what this reconciliation bill includes. Because I genuinely believe, and the polls back me up on this, that the American people want this. They don't want it just a little. They desperately want it. There was a poll in West Virginia that showed that when you read down the stuff that's in the Build Back Better agenda, the care for the elderly, vision, hearing, and dental and Medicare, paid family and medical leave, free community college, the child tax credit, and the clean energy components. Remember, this is in West Virginia. He also said, it's got this clean energy stuff that is a transition to renewables, create new jobs in this area. 68% of West Virginians said, I'm for that. Only 25% said they were opposed. And that's in a very, very Republican-leaning Trumpy state. And so when you've got that level of support, why don't you go to the mat for it? Why don't you fight for it with everything you've got? And one final thing I'll say as regards what Chappelle just said, which I think is so important, is I do not doubt for a moment that a substantial portion of black and brown and young and progressive voters will still vote Democratic in 2022 and in 2024. The active folks, the committed folks, the news junkies, a lot of folks who listen to the show, they'll still show up. They'll still vote. But the fact of the matter is that elections are close in America. They're won on the margins, not usually by huge figures. And so as a result, that the handful of folks, the small numbers of folks who just don't come, or maybe even among young people, the bigger numbers who don't show up, that is enough to give it to the Republicans. And so even if the Democrats didn't care about their base, even if they, really were sold out on all this stuff, for a purely political argument, they should be delivering. Because a failure to deliver really does create a vulnerability in 2022 and 2024. And Santita, that vulnerability, let's be blunt about it. What that means is the people who tried to steal the election in 2020 will be in full power in 2022 and 2024.
And that does
Think
not
about
frighten
that.
Chappelle, and that does not frighten me. We are from people who survived slavery. And my point is simply this.
Yeah. Well,
President Biden
political players
he's
should be
negotiating with
understanding
people who are his ideological twins. And that is insulting.
Yeah.
Stop that. And the media are corroborating, they're corroborating. In the meantime, people out here are starving. All of this Build Back Better helps to continue to whittle down and take a whack at childhood poverty. Wait. I mean, hold on, wait. Well, I mean, because wait a minute, because Chappelle is not. Let me say this to you, John, and I want you to respond. Chappelle is not going to hand the victory to the Republicans. Joe Biden is. Joe Cinema
That's
is.
right.
I mean, Joe. I keep conflating them, but Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're doing that, not the voters. They're doing it.
That's right. Of course, and that's the bottom line. That's my obviously the point of the piece I wrote. You can't, as a political party, you can never blame the voters, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's a losing strategy, right? You don't blame the voters. You give the voters something that they will deliver for you.
Well, why did you say that it's the surefire strategy? You said, before I go to Robert but wait a minute. Let me go to Robert from Wisconsin very quickly, and then I'm good, because I want you to really help us to put a button on this. Robert from Wisconsin, what's on your mind?
Morning.
Hey, sweetie.
Recently, Don Winslow came out with a YouTube video. It's about 2 minutes long. I encourage everyone to watch it. It's basically about Manchin and his family and some of their corruption. But in the video, it says that he got $1.1 million last year from his coal plant between him and his spouse. I think he made $184,000 in the Senate. My question is, Senate rules basically say that you can't have conflict or the appearance of conflict. So I guess my question is, what can be done to Joe Manchin, especially in terms of voting on climate? He clearly has conflict there.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But this Senate does not enforce conflicts. I mean, it's a painful reality. Russ Feingold, who served in the United States Senate from Wisconsin, and you, Robert, as a Wisconsinite, will know his name well. Russ Feingold tried to develop basic ethics rules for senators, and with John McCain, to some extent, also some rules on campaign finance. These were not radical proposals. These were simple, basic proposals that said, if you got an ethical conflict, you got to deal with it. The fact of the matter is, they bolted against Feingold on that. They never really backed him up on it. And the truth of the matter is that we have people sitting in the United States Senate today who have massive conflicts. And they're not just on, Manchin's one example. You've got people who are moving money around, during committee meetings off their phones, when they're hearing about the threat of COVID, right, in the early stages, moving money around, like, oh, wow, it looks like it's going to be pretty bad. I better get ahead of this and make some money here. And those people are still sitting in the Senate. So the fact of the matter is, their concerns, not all of them, but so many of them, their concerns are about themselves and about their power and their wealth, not about serving the great mass of American people. And, right now we're seeing the collision of that in the fight as regards this Build Back Better bill. Because here's the painful reality. Bernie Sanders said it to me the other day. I was interviewing him. And the painful reality is that everyone in America, virtually everybody, wants to lower prescription drug prices. You poll people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, it polls, astronomically well. And yet that's very likely going to get lost from this bill. And you're like, how could that happen? How can you have 90% support for something and it doesn't go through? And it's a good idea. It's a moral idea. It's a proper idea. But the answer is that Big Pharma has literally thousands, remember, underline that word, thousands of lobbyists flooding through Capitol Hill, former members of the House, former members of the Senate, former, political party leaders on the Republican and the Democratic side. And they're screwing this thing up. They're taking this thing out of there, lowering prescription drug prices for kids who need insulin, or people who need heart medicine.
I've got 20 seconds.
It is immoral.
It is immoral.
It is immoral and it is unethical.
Can you stay with me?
And it is unethical.
Can you stay with me for a couple of seconds after we get off the air?
Sure.
Just stay with me. We're talking with, just stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I want to thank all of my guests today, and of course, John Nichols, who is so generous in sharing all of his brilliance and experience with us, and national correspondent for The Nation magazine, the author of The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. That is what we're in, everybody. That is what we're in, and you need to get in it. Call 202-224-3121. They're taking food out of your baby's mouth. Think about that. They're taking food off your table. They're taking educational opportunities away from you. 2 years of free community college. Months off so you can take care of your newborn baby. I mean, really? Oh, you ought to be hot about that. And you need to press the president and all of these senators to do the right thing, which is to do right by you. I love you, everybody. Let's hear get a little bit more wisdom from John Nichols here on the Santita Jackson Show. Love you, everybody. Thank you, Cosme, for a great show. See you tomorrow. God willing. Yes, I wanted you to finish making your point before we go. I mean, because it's this we continue to end up here, John Nichols, here. And I think that we've got to direct the energy in the right spot. You've got a corporate media. This is not the mainstream media. Jim Narakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting corrected me, and I accept the correction. I thank him for that.
Well,
He said
it's not fall into that trap.
he said it's not mainstream media. This is corporate media, and corporate media give corporatists cover. That's what they do, and that's what they're doing with Joe Biden, who's from the corporation state. If you want a corporation, you get incorporated in Delaware, everybody. And this has nothing to do with me liking Joe Biden. I've known Joe Biden since I was a kid. He's a nice guy. It's just that our politics have never been in sync. And I never saw it more clearly than when Reverend ran for president, when he was telling people specifically, don't vote for Jesse Jackson. Okay, that's the campaign. I get it.
They briefly did.
Well, you know,
They did run against each other.
Absolutely, in 1988, and he did not win. Okay, Reverend was up until Hillary Clinton. Reverend was the highest second place finisher in the history of Democratic presidential primary politics. I'm over that because in your maturity, everybody, you get over those things. Okay, but a nice guy, warm, all of that. That's nice. That has nothing to do with 2 years of free college, 2 years of unpaid college, and investment in Americans, not just children, but workers who need to learn who need to be computer literate, John, in order to get these new jobs. This is paid family leave when you have a baby. In slavery, black women had these babies literally and had to get back out in the fields, if not that afternoon, the next day. See, these are the things that percolate in my mind because of our history, not my history, America's history. So I'm saying, wait a minute, for people not to bring up these conflicts of interest and why these people are voting as they do, that's criminal. It's criminal. And to put, I hear you, I think it's a wonderful, someone who's been very OSA, and I appreciate you. You're right, you do have to negotiate, and you're right, you do have to vote. But you know what, after people did vote for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden needs to come through for the people, and he did not run as a progressive. Frank Watkins, our friend, reminded us of that. He said, I defeated the socialist, which was Bernie Sanders. Okay?
That's right.
So he said all of that.
Exactly what he said.
So I'm over that. What I'm saying is, it's the energy of the progressives that put you in, and even Republicans agree with Build Back Better. So why aren't you pushing it through? Why aren't you squeezing him? Why aren't you saying, I beat Joe Manchin, I beat Kirsten Sinema? No, you said you beat Bernie Sanders. And I'm hot about that, John. You beat me up, but you give them a pass.
Well, and that's where this thing starts to fall apart.
It falls apart.
Again, and that's the point I want to make. It's an important one. You have, Santita, an incredibly engaged and incredibly wise listenership. These are folks who are the most likely voters, right? And they're also very, very thoughtful, very smart voters. And so a good chunk of them are going to vote in 2022 and in 2024. And they're going to vote Democratic, probably, not always. Not, they're going to, if there's an alternative, they may do that, but they're very likely to vote Democratic. But the thing is that the people who aren't listening to this show, good people, but maybe, they're off doing other things, and especially the younger folks, they're, in midterm elections especially, they need encouragement, right? They need a reason.
They need a reason
to come vote. And the Democrats, for the last couple of cycles, they've done very well by saying, well, your reason to come vote is Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is such a bad guy, you got to come vote. And that had a lot of resonance. It had a lot of power. It worked, I think, very well in 2018. It worked pretty well in 2020. But Donald Trump, for all of the threats that he poses, he's not on the ballot in 2022. And we're seeing right now in Virginia, where this Glenn Youngkin is running, I mean, he's got Trump's backing. He is clearly a Trump Republican in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But he's running this kind of, happy, upbeat, school-focused campaign. I think actually it's underpinned by a lot of very negative and very wrong-headed views. But he's running a certain kind of campaign. And, he's even in the polls against Terry McAuliffe.
But you know what? Can I put a pin in that?
Because
Because the piece that we cannot miss is this. The piece that we cannot miss is that you had a black lieutenant governor, and he had a lot of promise. And he got into a little trouble, but nobody's really talking about that now. And you had two black women who could have been positioned to run for governor. And they were overlooked to resurrect Terry McAuliffe, who you and I both know and like very much. This does not have anything to do with that. I know Terry McAuliffe. I know Governor McAuliffe. He's a nice guy. He's a friend. He is. That ain't got nothing to do with. You've got the first black elected governor in our history, Doug Wilder, who's digging in on him. Because that means there's an undercurrent of tension in the black community that if you don't have an enthusiastic black community, you ain't going to win. I didn't say you're not going to win.
Not in Virginia.
You ain't going to win. Okay?
Yeah.
So that has to be addressed. These things, and I'm saying these things go unaddressed. And then we wonder, oh my goodness, why are the Republicans controlling most of the state legislatures and gerrymandering Democrats out of power? And I don't hear a peep from the Democratic National Committee. I don't see the kind of campaigning that we need. I think that it is so, these financial conflicts of interest, I know I keep going back to that, but when you talked about climate change, and when you talked about this surefire strategy, I have to tell you, that jumped out at me when I read your piece in The Nation. The surefire strategy, I don't know why it jumped out at me, but I was like, wait a minute. It's almost like a calculation, John. It's like, wait a minute. They're letting him win, John.
They are, and the problem is, look, in politics, you never know where the line is between stupidity and dangerous calculus, right? Because often they intersect. And I'm fully willing to accept that there are some Democrats who really are lousy at what they do. They're just not good at political strategy. That's quite evident when you have a political party that should be doing so much better. So I understand. They're just some bad strategists, some hangers-on who don't know how to do it. But there are also folks who are, conflicted and who are at least or more committed to serving their campaign donors, to serving their own interests, and serving the special interests they've been aligned with, rather than serving the interests of the Democratic Party and, frankly, of the American people in the broader sense. And if we don't talk about this, if we don't recognize that reality, then there's an awful lot of people across this country who, for better or worse, really do believe in the Democratic Party. They want it to win. They're quite loyal to it. A lot of folks, and they're like, well, how come we're getting beat? How come we're being set back? It must be those horrible Republicans. Well, sometimes it isn't the horrible Republicans. Sometimes it's the inept or incompetent or corrupt Democrats. And that's an important thing to understand, because if you don't recognize that reality, you can't recognize why, in my opinion, the Democrats are so very vulnerable in 2022. There is a very real possibility that Democrats could lose the House and the Senate, a whole bunch of governorships. And if they do, then you're going to have people in charge who are the same people who tried to steal the 2020 election. If that is the case, then the board is set. The scenario is put in position to return Donald Trump to the presidency in 2024. And that's a reality that is not being created by Trump. It's being created by Democrats who don't stand up strong enough to fight against the special interests, to fight against the compromisers within their own party.
But may I offer this? It's not, let's be a little bit more specific. It's not the Democrats, it's the corporatists. You've got corporatists who are Democrats and you have corporatists who are Republicans. And they are together. They make a wonderful show for us that we can, so we can debate and we can be on talk radio and on and on and on. And we can write and we can write books.
Like that.
It's wonderful political theater, but they're really all on the same team. Okay? And I think we need to acknowledge that. And we need to deal with that. If you want to be a corporatist, fine. This is not the party for you, or maybe we need to create our own. I don't know. But I do know this. The corporatists who are Democrat and who are Republican in party, but who are corporatist in their politics, they're hurting us. And we need to deal with that. We have people who are rationing out their, write it down, you can quote me, okay? They're rationing out their insulin. They're now going back to animal grade insulin. I've done a story on this before because they don't have enough money. Because Kirsten Sinema is playing games for Big Pharma. Because Joe Biden's good friend, who's head of Pfizer, is playing a game with his employees trying to keep Big Pharma in charge of drug prices. So even when you're insured, you can't afford your medicine. It's just not right, John. And I have to be more specific than Democrats and Republicans because I'm seeing something else. These are corporatists and populists. And we need to call them out.
Been the fight. And this has been the fight for forever. It's not a new fight.
Didn't you write about this?
The fact is...
Isn't this your book?
Yeah, I did. It is.
Now, what's the name of the book?
It's so frustrating. Fight for the soul of the Democratic Party.
Oh, okay. Say it one more time so everybody can get it.
Fight for the soul of the Democratic Party.
Because, and the reason I want you all to get the book is because this fight is not new. And you need to see how this fight has played itself out from decade to decade, generation to generation, and why we need to learn from the past so that we can make corrections today and for the future. The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party by John Nichols. Please get the book. You know I was going to lead right back to the book. You know, I had to.
Well, I'm afraid it does. And the important thing to understand is that there's a base premise that I outline in the book, and it's a base premise that I've talked with you about many times. There is the moral imperative. And one of the things that the book goes back to is the fact that Henry Wallace, Franklin Roosevelt's second vice president, was basically kicked out of the party, was pushed aside because he said, we've got to address racism, and we've got to address sexism, and we've got to address inequality. And he was saying that in 1944, right? He was talking about doing the right thing almost 80 years ago, and they pushed him aside for people who were more compromising, who were more centrist. Well, what was the dynamic? Roosevelt dies, Wallace isn't there, Truman comes in, Truman compromises, loses the House and Senate. In 1946, we get the Taft-Hartley law, we get all the compromises. And while Truman did eventually get reelected as president, the fact of the matter is that the New Deal began to wither. And you say, well, okay, that was one example. No, Jimmy Carter, in his first years, good man, but in his first years as president, pulled his punches, compromised too much, lost a lot of seats in Congress, then lost the presidency. And you say, okay, well, those are two examples of what happens. Then Bill Clinton comes along. He does NAFTA, he does GATT, he compromises on health care, he compromises on all sorts of other issues, gets really close to Wall Street. 1994, Democrats lose their congressional authority. You say, okay, well, that's three examples. Okay. Then Barack Obama comes along. Good man, working hard, trying to do a lot of stuff, but compromises on the response to the Great Recession, the critical issue of that moment. And 2010, loses the House. 2014, loses the Senate. He's so disempowered that at the end of his presidency, he can't even get a hearing on his Supreme Court nominee. And so this is example after example after example after example of what happens when the Democrats compromise on these core issues. When they pull their punches, the end result is a midterm election where they lose their power.
And we lose, ultimately, right?
Well, we lose because if you imagine the Democrats have their flaws, Republicans have their flaws. The Democrats are at least somewhat more likely to listen to the cry of the people for expansion of Medicare and Medicaid and these issues. And so it's the loss then goes way beyond politics. It goes to society. And we live in a society, wealthiest in the world, where we have massive inequality. We live in a society, 400 years on, we still have not addressed fundamental issues of racism in this country. We live in a society where women still earn less than men on the dollar. We live in a society where, we have all the ability to deal with the climate crisis, and yet we're not dealing with it. We're not doing the things we need to do. And so you say, well, how could that possibly happen? How could that possibly happen? Well, it happens because instead of having a trajectory from the New Deal, where when Democrats come to power, they do great big things and move the ball, right? They move us in the right direction. Since Lyndon Johnson, and I'll give credit to Barack Obama with the Affordable Care Act, but we just haven't had enough of that big progress. And as a result, the average voter looks at an election and they say, well, I don't know that it matters much. I don't know that when Democrats are in charge that they really do, what we elected them to do. If voters start to say that, if they start to think that way, you have the drop-off in turnout, and you start to look at 2022 as very possibly a repeat of 1946, 1978, 1994, 2010, 2014.
That's why you've got to get the book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, because the pattern has been set. But what we have now more than ever, at least FDR was a traitor to the corporate class. That's why they didn't like
Pretty
him.
good sometimes on that. Yeah.
He was traitor to his class.
He actually said, I welcome their hatred. And that's such a freeing statement, right?
Yeah.
When FDR was taking his hit and they were going after him, really trying to beat him, he said, I welcome their hatred.
I welcome their hatred.
What can they do to you?
That's right.
What can they do to you?
Well, I welcome their hatred. And at the end of the day, we're talking about him. And we're not talking about Truman. We're talking about the people who turned the tide for the people, really. And think about that, everybody. That's why when John, I said, John, what do you want to talk about? And when I read your piece, I said, the surefire strategy. I'm sorry. It was like we continue to do this. And I think it's OSA. I hear you. No one is advocating not voting. And I don't think Chaparral is. Chaparral's not advocating that.
No.
Chaparral is, you can hear from her passion that she gets out, she votes, and she does.
Reality.
But what you are looking at, people, what you hear from her is not disappointment, you hear anger. Because these are people, Chaparral's in all the time. Chaparral had a son who was killed. We're trying to figure out why the police won't turn over the tapes. She's got 4 foster children. I mean, she takes on, because she said, I couldn't leave these kids out here. This is someone who really cares about people. Yeah. So let's not do that to each other. And even when people feel angry about voting, let's talk to them. We don't need to talk down to anybody. We don't need to do that. And we don't do that here on the Santita Jackson Show. We don't do that. What we need to do, I'm saying, focus on Manchin and Sinema and their conflicts. Focus on all of these media outlets, some of which you love a whole lot, who won't mention their conflicts, who won't call them out. They could be called out into making the vote for you. But we don't call them out, and so it just goes, and so it goes. You've got the last word, John.
I'll tell you, you mentioned Chaparral here, and I think of Chaparral who we've talked so many times. She's a caller, but really, she's an astute political analyst.
Well, she always wants to talk to you. Let's be clear on that.
She's a wise political analyst, and you have a lot of callers who fit into that category. Mm-hmm. And You see, I think that's one of the powers of this show. You're building out a conversation with people who know the stakes, who understand the reality. And that's actually how you get to a deeper, stronger, smarter conversation, right? It's what makes this show so important. Because unlike a lot of shows where it's always sort of playing catch up, like, oh, did you know this? And people are like, oh, really? Is that the case? No. This is a show where you've got a conversation going where people know the case. They know what's going on, and then take it to that deeper, smarter level. And I think this is the important thing to understand, that that's where we all need to get to. We all need to get to the point where we're aware of what's at stake, and we're aware of the history, right? And we put these things together, and we come up with a new politics. A politics that's different, that doesn't just reinforce the status quo, that actually challenges it, and that where necessary upends it. And I think that, partially it's the smart work that you do, smart work that callers on this show do. Partially it's the reality of our times, which unfortunately are pointing us in some dangerous directions. But the end result is that, maybe this is my optimism coming through. I think that we have the potential to come out of this in a better way, in a better place, because we know more, we think deeper, we respond more powerfully, and maybe, just maybe, we break out of this sort of narrow zone that we've been in and get to some kind of higher ground.
Amen to that. I'm hopeful, and I agree with you. And I think that the more all of this corruption and all of this anti the people, all of these actions, that all the more we expose them, the clearer you get on them. Don't lose hope. Keep hope alive. Seriously. Now is the time for you to act.
That's exactly right.
These are things that you suspected some time ago, but now you know. So now is the time for you to really get involved, everybody. Now you must register to vote. Now you must vote. Now you must write letters, emails, call these networks and ask, why aren't you asking these questions? You need to do that. You can. John, I love you. I'm going to run onto the Zoom call. You always hold me over for my Zoom call on Tuesdays.
Those are good.
You always hold me over, but I'm like, to be able to get to have access to this great mind is just what a blessing it is. What a blessing it is. What a blessing you are. And I just thank you, and I love you. You know I do. You're my dear brother.
And my dear sister, be strong.
You
Go
too.
do a Zoom call and do it well. I know you will.
Oh gosh. Love and solidarity to my brother John. You could have seen the face I just made. Oh my gosh.
Zoom calls are gonna do us in. But
oh my gosh. Yes. They are. They're a lot. They're a lot. Love you.
Yeah,
Love you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.